Good morning and welcome to a review of the 2021 Trinity Lutheran Church budget. And all who are on, welcome, and those who eventually will listen to this. We have some good news. 2020 has been an interesting year for all of us. Right now, what you're seeing is a comparison of the 2021 budget to the 2020 budget. And below the table, you can see my comment there. This year, we faced a unique challenge due to the impacts of COVID-19. And it definitely had a significant impact on 2020 and will have a carryover impact into 2021. So that factored into our planning and so forth. So I'll just, from the overview, just from a summary, you can see that we anticipate versus the 2020 budget, we anticipate 58,500 less in receipts, and offsetting that, we anticipate about 60,000 less in expenses, which gets us to a net of 2,000 favorable, which then is offset by paying down some additional principal on our mortgage. So bottom line, we're net income after we pay our debt, there will be a 1545 versus 1299, or $246 better. Essentially a break-even budget, and it follows the pattern of prior years. However, this was not a typical year, I will tell you. So just looking at the key elements of the budget development, we started in August. So item number one, review the 2020 actuals to budget. So that was a big factor. And once I have the August results, I plug them into our budget template. And then I send it out to each of the ministries for their input. Each of the ministries then comes back and says, Steve, this is what we plan. And so we plug a preliminary budget together on that. I'll go into Portico and get the benefits, do a cost pro forma from Portico that will plug into our projected benefits. The amortization schedule, I'll look at where we anticipate our mortgage balance is going to be based on our interest rate and so forth, and project that out. And then plug all those things in to item number 6, update the template with the ministry forecast and benefits reforecast. Well, when we first did the 2021 budget, we looked at the potential of 110,000 shortfall, primarily due to COVID, and a lot of that was driven by the anticipation of a much reduced income from the preschool, somewhere in the area of about $90,000 reduction in revenue from the preschool, which will have a similar, a similar issue in 2021. 2020 versus 2021 will have a similar kind of issue to deal with. When we got that, reviewed it with the council and so forth, we went back and asked each of the ministries to relook at their budget. And I think everybody in the ministries were just kind of saying, well, this is what the budget we had for 2020. We're just kind of doing it in parallel with, like in prior years. Well, this isn't like in prior years. So everybody had to go back and rethink, okay, so we're going to have much lower level of activity in the church, and right now I still think that's going to be the case, and so forth. And so we did step number 9. We reforecasted the budget and anticipated that we would have a 2020 surplus at the end of the year after consideration of the PPP surplus. As you may be aware of, we did apply under the CARES Act, the PPP funding, and successfully received $154,000, which was approved by the bank, which helped us out and helped to offset the shortfalls in a number of different areas. We presented a revised budget to the exec team and then the council at November 15th meeting. And then I did a draft presentation of the budget to the congregation November 22nd and doing one today. But meanwhile, on December 15th, the council voted to approve the budget as presented at that point in time. And I think what we discussed is, depending on how the year-end results actually pan out, we might have some further tweaking of the budget, which we have. And the final item is to get the congregation approval at the January meeting. Okay. So next thing I want to, because 2020 was so impactful, I'm going to go to the 2020 screen. And this is a comparison of the 2020 actuals to the 2020 budget. So you can see in total receipts, we're 22,000 more in receipts in 2020 than budgeted. And one of the first things that was pretty exciting, and for the first time I think I witnessed, we exceeded our member giving budget by 7,000 for the year when we had been running 40 to 50,000 all along under the budget. So December was a fantastic response from the congregation. Did I say December? Okay. So that was a wonderful positive. Then fundraisers and loose basket. We had COVID impacts due to that. We didn't have a garage sale and other things that impacted that. Probably the garage sale was the biggest driver of that. And then the preschool, as I had mentioned, because the attendance, in order to comply with the state health requirements, was cut in half. Tuitions were down substantially, in this case from budget 93,939. And then the rental and income, we stopped renting out the gym and so forth, and there were other income impacts. That was 31,000. So if I just highlight those three alone, that's 138,000 reduction from budget from what we anticipated. But then we have the PPP funding that we obtained and have received, and that brought us to a net positive of 22,000 on the revenue side. Then if you look at the income, at the expense side, we had a budget of $1,045,000 and our actual is 931. So we underspent on the expenses 114,799. And that's just due to the reduced overall level of activity in the church. And some of the highlights from the facility, we had budgeted a substantial amount of money for potential HVAC repairs. I think it was around 27,000, and we didn't spend anything, at least nothing that hit the books. So that's the majority of the facility savings there. In mission, we ended up being $7,606 under on that, and spent most of the budget there. I'd have to drill in, Kathy, to give you more detail. Let's see, 76.
Well, and I think, Steve, we kind of, the mission team revised our kind of end of year activities, I think, based on some consultation with you and some other members of council because of the, I guess, not being sure, at a point, probably early December on, where we were going to land as an overall.
Yeah, in looking at the budget detail, I don't know, can you see that when I just,
yeah.
Okay. So looking at the budget detail, the biggest difference I see is in meals do matter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, because of, again, because of the whole COVID thing. Christy was not able to, to hold as many sessions, and therefore not probably purchase as much food.
Yeah. So meals do matter, and also the mission trip.
Yep.
So those would be two of the areas that pretty much drove that. Let's see. Okay, get back. Less salary and expenses, both on the preschool. I think just due to the overall lower activity, there was less salary expenses, as well as expenses for supplies and other things for the preschool. And then overall, just each mission just had a lower level of activity. There's some things like in the music area, special alternative services or special events. We obviously, the overall activity geared down on that. And each of the missions, adult spiritual growth and youth spiritual growth and so forth, we had reductions. And then bottom line, the expense, the other item that impacted was expense write-offs from the prior year. When we looked at old payments that never materialized, we voided them out, and that helped out overall, so that we saved, versus our expense budget, almost 115,000. So net operating income before debt, we're at 137,000 positive, which is the best results I've seen in my 4 years. And then that's offset slightly by the additional principal that we paid down on the mortgage. And so we're 135,909 positive before a net surplus for the year. And then in talking with the council, we said, well, we know we're going to have a surplus. At that time, we were thinking 65,000. The year-end results came in really strong, and I have reviewed this with the executive committee briefly this past week, and then sent it out for final review with the council today, that we would increase the carryover of the PPP surplus of 90,000. So when we go back to the comparison of 2021 to 2020 budget, you'll see that number in there. And then even after we do the 90,000, that still is 47,000 that we can put into discretionary, which then increases our reserve for council discretionary funds. In overall, from prior years, that would bring us up to about $120,000 that we have on the books as a reserve. One of the things that's kind of interesting, if you look at the actual giving history, we had 645,000 this year. In 19, we were at 618. In 18, 630. In 17, 665, and 16, 707. So you can see every year our giving dropped. 707, 665, 630, 618. And from a budget standpoint, with COVID and everything, we still feel we need to be conservative, but boy, what a nice response from the congregation in 2020. That takes us to the current budget. So going up to comparing the budget of 2021 to 2020, which keep in mind again that a lot of this was driven by the 2020 trends and actual results. We have anticipate member giving of 615 versus the 638 of 2020. And this is just being conservative on our part. The fundraisers and loose giving, I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that we have a garage sale and some of these other fundraisers, but I think we still should be, I think we all agree that we should be conservative on that. And then the preschool, I think we're going to have a similar year to 2020. We have a anticipated 90,000 reduction, similar to what actually did result in 2020. And then rental and income, a similar, position there. So you can see we've got 148,000 in anticipated reductions from the preschool, rental, and giving versus the budget. And then that's offset by the PPP rollover, that 90,000. Remember the 90,000 shown is, let's roll that over into the 2021 budget. So bottom line, from the receipts, we're anticipating $1,032,000 versus $1,090,000, or 58,000 less than the 2020 budget. Then on the expense side, again, I think our approach was, as I talked about earlier, is that, okay, we're probably going to have a lower level of activity. This is the result of each of the ministries going back and basing 2021 on the 2020 actuals. And so you can see there's various reductions here for each of the different ministries. We talk about various reductions, reduced staff, reduced utility costs. All of these things did happen in 2020. We're kind of paralleling that. We re-looked at the model for preschool salaries, even though there's a core team of teachers that will still be required in a certain amount of expenses. We felt that it would, again, be similar to 2020, that there's supplemental teachers that come in and help out and so forth, that probably, won't be the case, unless something happens dramatically. But if things come back strong and we're able to bring on more help, then we'll probably also increase our tuitions. Music accounts, again, just being conservative, following the pattern of 2020, and then updated the amortization schedule. So any questions on that? So overall, we're saying 985,000 versus $1,045,000, so a reduction of 60,000 in expenses. That comes down to a net income of 47,000 versus 45,000 in 2020. Pay the principal on the mortgage, 45,000. As time goes on, the principal of the mortgage goes down, and so we're going to pay more in principal than interest, and so that goes up by $1,758, and the net income after debt is $1,545 versus $1,299. But essentially, it's a break-even budget, following the pattern of what we have tried to do each year.
Steve, I would like to express thanks, I guess, to you and the council for all the work you did on this, but also for your vision to maintain the level of missional support, financially that we have in the past, given everything else that's going on. So
I think there was unanimous support on the council that says let's keep the mission. If we can all do that, let's strive to keep the mission budget the same, even though we might overall be having less revenue. Let's try to keep it the same, and it looks like we'll be able to do that.
Just thank you very much. That's an important piece of what Trinity does, even more so during with everything that's going on right now. So
okay.
Steve, I want to thank you too for an incredible job, not just for this last year, but for the last 4 years. But it was an incredible challenge just looking at the statements every month this last year, because it was such a dynamic world with all the COVID stuff. We had no idea how to expect or anticipate anything. And then when it came to the budgeting process to think about what we're going to do in 2021, you know, that situation evolved, and Steve has just done an incredible job with the budget and adjusting the budget as things have changed and evolved. So I think this is about the 6th to 8th version I've seen that Steve has put out over the last 6 months, because things have changed so much. But I think he's done an incredible job looking at kind of where we've been and then trying to anticipate next year. And I think, at least from Trinity's perspective, you know, the dollar benefit we got from the PPE, because we've had such good giving and support over this last year, it carries into next year's budget. And we're assuming that the first 6 months of this year are going to be similar to the last 6 months in 2020, you know, with preschool volume down and not being able to rent the facility and all that. So we're hoping that the last 6 months we'll start to see more of a return to more normal, if you will, whatever that will be. And I think that, you know, Steve has tried to be conservative and anticipating the first 6 months also being a challenge, but given us the ability within the budget to also be very comfortable with where we are. And I think what's kind of neat, the way it ended up, is as the PPP dollars go away in 2021 and we spend those, then that roughly $90,000 to $100,000 difference can be made up by the preschool returning to normal, the fundraisers, and the rental property going back up. So in 2022, you know, hopefully at least the bottom line numbers will be very simple, but the, you know, sources of income will be different and the activity levels will be different. But
Right.
to get to this point and make those adjustments, you know, Steve has just done a wonderful job. So thanks, Steve, for that. And thanks for your time, you know, explaining all this to the congregation several times now, and great job.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, I feel good about, you know, we wanted to also set up the budget that we feel comfortable that we can work it for 2021, and passing the baton to the next treasurer.
Steve, if I could, I have 4 thoughts that I'd like to share. Do we have time?
Sure.
Wonderful. First is an echo of what Kathy and Kevin have said. From this guy's point of view, it has been very reassuring to know that you are overseeing the budget and you have done a magnificent job of being a financial steward for Trinity. And it's, as I said, very reassuring to this member of the congregation that you were where you were for the last 4 years. So thank you very much. Second thought, I'm delighted to see the hockey stick rebound in congregational or member giving. That's a very telling number, and I think it's indicative of, if you will, the attitude that's pervasive at Trinity, of I think enthusiasm for where we are and where we're going. So that's terrific.
Hey, Fred,
Yeah.
just to interrupt you for a second, it gave me goosebumps when you said that. It really is tremendous. You know, it says a lot about our congregation. It really, really does.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. And as I've told to Kevin, and I'll repeat this at the annual meeting, as chairman of the nominating committee, I was taken aback by the enthusiastic response of the people that we approached in filling nominee positions. Many of them were immediate, spontaneous acceptances. And I don't think that's been the general pattern before. And I think that's another indication of, if you will, the attitude and the enthusiasm that exists at Trinity. And by the way, circling back to my first point, I'm delighted that there will be indeed an orderly transition of power from you to Paul. We are going from one, I think, outstanding manager to another outstanding manager. And Trinity is blessed with both of you.
I was really happy to hear that Paul was going to take that role.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I remember where I was sitting when he called me back and said, Fred, I've thought about your proposal, and I held my breath. And so the next reaction I had was a big smile on my face. Third point, it's interesting to me to study the dynamics within the preschool. If I remember the numbers correctly, we had a $90,000 decrease in tuition, and we had a $30,000 decrease in salaries.
Okay.
And I'm guessing that we didn't have a commensurate decrease in salaries because there is a core group of teachers that are required, whether there's 3 students or 5 students. Fair?
That's correct. Yeah.
What it says to me as an old economics major is those last 30 or 40 students in each year's class are critical, because they're the ones that put us into the black. So as we think about the future, having full enrollment is essential to the economics, because it's the last 20, 30, or 40 students that make up that $90,000 difference, because looks like we're fixed at about $250,000 of salary, whether there's 3 students or 13 students. I'm using numbers for mere illustrative purposes.
Right.
And I think my point is obvious. Last point, to me, and this is Fred's point of view, that $45,000 of debt service screams to me to be the candidate for the sowing the future receipts. I have a strong point of view that says we ought to erase that debt entirely and as quickly as we can. And it throws off $45,000 back into the church instead of sending the check to a bank that we can use for all lots of things, not the least of which is the mission program. So I challenge anyone to find another revenue source that throws off guaranteed $45,000 a year in and year out. I know that debt service decreases over time, but to me, that's a necessity, just a point of view.
Fred, one other thing to add to that, we're also paying interest expense of $25,000. So that overall is a $70,000 expense.
I thought it was, but I didn't want to venture into an area that I wasn't sure of. So thank you for that. So I think that makes my argument even more compelling.
Yeah.
And Fred, from my perspective, this will be a key focus area for the council and the capital campaign team that we're kind of relooking at how we want to do that moving forward. But this will be major priority work in early 2021.
Yeah. While I will, and I've expressed this to the members of the committee on which I serve, because I'm on the Sowing the Future campaign committee. We set a goal of 1.5 million. We're 2/3 the way there. I'm not overly enthusiastic or overwhelmed by the giving to date. I'm optimistic that we'll get to the 1.5, but at least we're assured of the one. And to me, there are two key priorities, and they add up coincidentally to about 1.1. And it's the debt and the roof.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but back to my first point, Steve, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed having the service opportunity, and especially this last year or so working with the council and the staff and each of the ministries. The cooperation and the team spirit has just been great. It really has.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Another indication
job.
of the strength of Trinity today.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.